believe the job numbers. In every application I ever had with the state, I never said we were going to get 2,000.
Amy was right. You should give it.
I'm sorry. I don't believe the job numbers. So they're on the side if you believe it and do what you want with it. But here are the projects that these ones that work with investing in technology-based industries, expanding the Center for Discovery is counterintuitive. This is a place where, when I happen to have a child who has severe disabilities, so I know how this can affect families. My wife believes in a more divine plan, perhaps, than I do, but she believes that the reason we have a child with disabilities is because we've also been made fortunate, we have a lot of resources, and we can go out and help other kids. We do everything we can. But it's a national problem. It's almost epidemic in terms of the problems that there are with developmentally disabled, autistic, on the spectrum, and so forth. If I asked everybody to raise their hand if they had such a child, knew such a child, or was an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, virtually everybody would have their hands up. And so we thought that having a center which could really make a difference, could be world-class, is something that would actually attract employees. We moved to Chappaqua, in part because I knew that those schools there would take care not only of my gifted child. I wasn't worried, and there were parents in our district who were worried that the kids didn't get calculus in 7th grade. I didn't really think that was so important, but they also mainstreamed my kid who couldn't read. These sorts of support systems can make a huge difference in terms of creating the right environment, and frankly, they can save, in a practical manner, save the state a lot of money. Healthcare from beginning to end, from discovery, biotechnology, all the way through the end of the healthcare system. Health is such an important part of our economy, and people want to be where they can get good healthcare for their families. We also, healthcare is great for economic development, because if you look at this, you'll see that people in healthcare, and by the way, also in information technology, are amongst the highest paid. And what is economic development? It's bringing more money into circulation. So if people are paid more, better jobs, it gets spread around, the economy grows. And that's why I think everybody would like these kinds of jobs. Another core strategy, growing natural resources, agriculture, food and beverage. We had a number, about 10 priority projects, which once again, the job numbers focus more on what I think the estimated overall cost of these. And then finally, we had one in each of 2 of our other areas. And if you look at it all together, what you find is that there's about $750 million of investment, which is leverage now nearly 30 to 1. You know, leverage is what you guys can do. You can't write the check and give us $750 million to do all this stuff. You can write a check for about 30% maybe, and then maybe we can start to shape things and get things done. And when it sounds like does it really matter? It mattered to us when you're a young company and just getting started. That $250,000 that Governor Cuomo gave us, which is, as I said earlier today, I'm still paying back to it turns out to be something that can make a difference. One last point I want to cover, then I'll stop, as I know we're running close. Amy's getting fidgety over there. So is that, as Ben has said, we're going to take actions that are beyond what money can buy. And sometimes these actions may be more important. We actually are trying to put together, and now we've got some success. We've got a meeting with the Comptroller's Office. I'll be meeting with him a week from Monday. I want to tell him that, look, I know you're a fiduciary, you're going to invest all the state pensions, but every other state in the union who's made it a success in biotechnology has figured out a way to pour some of that money into venture capital invested in this state, not invested in California, for goodness sake. We've got to figure out how to do that, and we've got to get people around the table, and this is what I'm talking about. This won't create any jobs today, but it may create jobs down the road. So we believe these actions are important. We think, on the other hand, I said we do have to focus on the near term as well. We think that Ulster County's Ready to Go program which sort of keeps an inventory and really makes sure everything is ready to go if somebody wants to move in. We're monitoring that, and I'd like to see us export that to all the other counties in our region and perhaps around the state, if it turns out to be a project that can do the job, and so forth. I'm not trying to go through all of these, but I want to just get the point across that we're taking actions because we don't have a lot of other things we can do. We can tell you how to spend your money, but we can borrow your authority and try and influence what regional activities there are and shape them in directions and let people know that the state cares and we want to do things. The revitalizing the areas that need to be revitalized is not something that we can neglect. It won't work. If you're just doing this to how you're going to maximize your quarterly returns in your business, that's not going to be economic development that's sustainable. So I believe that we have come a long way. We had a long way to go, but we really have come a long way. We appreciate the partnership with the state. We appreciate, even though this is a bottom-up process, it still needs leadership at the top. We appreciate what you and the governor have done. And so I'll end here and turn it back over to you.
Let me just say that you indeed have come a long way. I was one of those that, I was about to say I had the pleasure, but I had the obligation of reviewing 10 regional plans, and this is much clearer, much easier for somebody who's as simplistic as I to understand once you narrow it down to 4 basic areas. But something that hit me as you were going through it is that while you are clearly aware of the fact that you don't want parts of the region falling behind, and you pointed to housing as an example of something you were doing in Yonkers related to the fact that we don't want to leave part of the population behind. I was struck that you didn't spend too much time talking about the jobs that might be created that would help people in those types of areas. Which is not to say I'm not incredibly impressed by your focus on biotechnology. In fact, that's something of great interest. Ken Adams and I were talking about how you get the kinds of investments that we need because we've got these great academic medical centers, one of which you graduated from. We've got enormous talent, and yet we are doing so badly when it comes to biotechnology. But that's not my question. My question has to do with workforce development. How are you doing in terms of workforce development, and have you spent much time thinking about those folks that don't have the kinds of skills you need in biotechnology?
Well, in biotechnology, I can tell you what we're doing, and I think a lot of the companies that are around are doing, is we have sort of 3 things we do. We have a summer program at our company, which we bring in interns, and we get interns from all around the region, including the economically more challenged areas, kids who wouldn't otherwise get an exposure to this sort of thing, as well as the kids who come from families that would naturally push them into the exposure. So we have that. The second is we send out a science truck going around the whole region to try and expose people to the powers and wonders of science and try and make a difference. As a training, I think the iBio Center should be able to train the workers that can make a difference. That is, there are all levels of skill, and not everybody who works in biotechnology and healthcare has to be a PhD scientist. There are plenty of people who in animal husbandry and laboratory technicians and facilities management, all that sort of stuff. I think their experience in the iBio incubator would give, part of that mission is training.
In the 2 other quick examples, in the IT area, that's really one of Marist's fortes, in addition to many of our other partners. I mentioned training and ZOS education. The other thing we run here at Marist College is a Center for Data Center Professionals. Data centers are critical to the concept of cloud computing. And again, we offer training worldwide and certificates at 3 different levels and the 6 major aspects of data center management that are necessary in cooperation with our technology partners. So we're involved in that area. And Mr. Secretary, I do appreciate your questions. I think we have been very concerned about both minority women and lower income opportunities, because that is also an important part of our economy. And where our technology initiatives clearly focus on high-end, well-paying permanent jobs. In the area of the agriculture, food service, tourism area, we'd have to say when we look at federal charts that obviously those are jobs that are probably going to pay half as much, but and in some cases are entry-level jobs. But we also recognize that that's important to drive down our unemployment rate in New York and throughout America.
Commissioner Overton.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I guess in kind of building off the Secretary's comments, I want to congratulate you for taking a hard look at your original plan, a realistic look, and recognizing that there were some weaknesses there for sure. And not stopping and continuing to move forward as obviously you have, and continuing to unify the region, and continuing to reach out to the private sector beyond just the state dollars that were involved. And so I want to congratulate you for taking the state dollars that were there in leveraging more money for projects that you're building on down here in this region. Having said that leveraging, I think, is one of the keys, certainly to maximizing state dollars. You had a ratio, I believe it was 1 to 28. And when you factor that ratio in one of the themes that has evolved as we've talked to other regions around the state is using a ratio of leveraging. When you figure that, is that dollar for dollar? Or is there in-kind factored into that 28 to 1? How do you derive that number? And do you also see the importance of leveraging as well?
If we don't leverage, there's no point in spending time on this, because let's face it, there just isn't enough money coming to any one region, no matter how good your plan is, to do something without leverage. It's just a fact. I know that Amy's office is very careful about this. I talk with her a lot about making sure that we're just not putting in dollars that aren't backed up by what they've promised. This leverage, by the way, is the number you see there is not simply the ratio of the dollars to the bid to the ask, that is how much they're going to put in, how much they want the state to put in. That's what we've actually whittled it down dramatically, what we recommend dollars go in. So this is and it is a dollar we're measuring that ratio based on real dollars, that how many dollars we would hope would be allocated towards our priority projects versus how many dollars the total priority projects would generate in activities.
I would also add, I think this average is probably a little misleading, as sometimes averages are. Some of our projects geared more to small businesses and what we think have great growth opportunities are not leveraged as highly as, say, something like cloud computing, which has huge leverage to it because we've got corporate partners to put in resources to help leverage in addition to what we're willing to do here at Marist. So the average may be misleading, but your point is still on the mark that we know we have to leverage and we know we have to produce. That's the other thing we have emphasized with applicants this year. With the way the state is funding these programs, don't go in and try to play games to get money, because you're not going to get the money till you produce results. So we feel pretty good about all these projects and the jobs that they could ultimately produce.
Thank you. I just want to expound upon that a little bit, because you are talking about creating projects like the iBio and BBT Labs and the Center for Growth and Advanced Manufacturing. And you're looking at cutting costs for people, their entry into different areas. Can you give us a little bit of more of a description as to what businesses you would in fact be targeting in those areas? Small businesses, would you cross regional lines? You know, are you looking to partner with other regions and become a center, you know, for this type of activity? And what small businesses or medium-sized businesses would you be talking about?
Primarily high-tech manufacturing area, is that what you like to focus on?
Well, just because you are looking at wanting us to invest, which I think is, and I also, let me preface my statement by saying that from what I see, I wasn't part of the last strategic team, but from what I see, you've come a long way. And I also want to thank you for your hospitality today. The boat ride and all of the presentations on the boat were very enlightening and educational for me. So I want to thank everyone who was involved in that. It was very well done. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let me just answer your question around high-tech manufacturing, because I think that's an example where members of the council, and this was really led by members of the council, really didn't assume that we knew everything. They went out and reached out to small manufacturers in this area and said, what do you need to compete on a national and global level, and got input back. That input that we got from these small manufacturers impacted the strategy that group came back to our council with. So
allowing them access to machinery and that type of thing?
Yeah, sometimes it could be loans to help them expand, as was the case with many of the small businesses that we were convinced could grow. Sometimes it could be advice. We even, to do some cross area between, say, cloud computing and manufacturing, we are looking at ways that we could deliver tools to small businesses that couldn't afford to set up, some say, the design elements of high-tech manufacturing through a cloud, but that would allow them to compete on, again, a national or global level and expand their businesses. But we listen to manufacturers who are in business rather than theorizing ourselves about what would really work.
And it's also not just manufacturers. We listen to small business people. Where's Mary? Mary, maybe you might want to, as an owner of a small business, do you think we're addressing, or how are we addressing the needs of small businesses at the council level?
I think that we've raised a lot of concerns about finding resources, where to go for information. I think the council has been very active in trying to bring those resources to everybody, be it a well-run business or business or a small business. So I think that they've been very active in trying to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Mack?
In the interest of time, a short response would be fine here, but I'm curious as to, within the council, to what extent there was deliberation in going from the 15 to 4, perhaps even going further to 2, because given the distribution of the projects, this is really about investment and attracting and retaining, ultimately, at least by the weighting of the projects. And we were in Plattsburgh yesterday, where a lot of the presentations centered on this notion that they didn't have a big bang, that they had what they called instead firecrackers, multiple projects across a wide range of areas, many of which the proposed funding was an order of magnitude smaller than your smallest project. So I'm just curious as to where that conversation is, and whether there was any thought to essentially doubling down on the investment and basically using a sequential approach and saying some of the other priorities will come later once that capital is invested and you begin to see a return on that.
You know, Commissioner, you've hit on exactly what we struggled with. And I don't think we came up with a clear answer. You know, in this business, in economic development, it strikes me most of what you do is going to fail. So if you focus too much, you're just going to focus all your efforts on failure. On the other hand, if you're too diffuse, you're going to get nothing done. I don't know if 4 is the magic number. I can tell you that the battle scars are real. I'm an easygoing guy, But you wouldn't believe what some of these council members are like. So we've tried. So I don't know. I hope 4 is the right number, but we're going to take another look.
I think we can make the case that in these 4, we have real strengths. And you want to invest when you have strengths, when you have assets, and you've already seen some modicum of results in terms of the job creation as some of these numbers reflected. So maybe it should have been 3, but I think there is enough strength in each of these areas that you can see jobs created if you invest in some of our projects.
Mind you, if you just go to the slides or in your book, what you'll see is that most of them were focused on only 2 strategies, okay? So to be fair, even though the negotiation got us down to 4, we really sort of paid the most attention to 2 anyway. So you could say it's really 2 with a couple of others for me.
President Driscoll.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me begin by thanking the Council for your presentation today. And as Lillian pointed out, the boat trip I thought was very enlightening, and it was a wonderful opportunity to see from the river this beautiful part of New York State. And for the goods that were on the boat as well, I have to say I busted my daily carb count, but it was worth every bite. So thank you so much for that. So I'm interested in really kind of, it's a trickle-down question, and there may be 2 parts to this. You know, you've identified your core strategies, and congratulations on refocusing, to those 4 core strategy areas. And I completely understand the tension between the short-term and long-term strategies that business men and women are faced with each and every day. So I'm going to take it's a longer-term approach. Do you see the projects that you've selected in these core areas, are they helping address what you had identified as your critical workforce development needs for the long term? And secondly, are there regulatory barriers that need to be considered or that you're recognizing as an impediment to getting your plan accomplished?
Well, I'll take the second. I'll leave the harder one to you first. And in terms of regulatory barriers, people like to blame on their regulatory barriers. In my business, people like to say, hey, it's the FDA's fault. That's the ultimate regulatory agency because we can't get a product anywhere without them saying it's a product. But that's a bunch of nonsense. Regulations aren't really the problem, okay? And people like to say it, but CEOs they like to say a lot of things, and a lot of them aren't true. But I don't believe that regulations are the barrier. I think what we realize, and I think that the people on our council would agree with and have agreed with, it's not that the regulations are a problem, because I don't want to get rid of regulations and dump my stuff into the beautiful Hudson River. That's no good. But what we do need is a predictable pathway in a reasonable period of time, so that we partner with regulatory agencies and we say, okay, we want to do this in an environmentally friendly way, because we live here too, right? The question is what is that going to take, and how long is it going to take us to know whether we're on the right path or not? And I think speed and clarity are far more of the issues than regulations per se.
I would add that in the technology areas, fortunately, our technology strategy, you'd all have to consider is clean industry. So we got an advantage there. When you move into some of the waterfront and ag, waterfront development issues, that becomes more of a challenge. And on our council, we have Ned Sullivan, our president of Mid-Hudson, one of the major environmental organizations in the country. So we're trying to balance both economic growth, which we're all committed to, but also, protect the long-term interests that we have on this beautiful Hudson, because we think it's that balance which is going to be in the best interest of the state and the long-term interest of growing jobs.
Just to come back to your training question, if you're thinking about high-tech industries, okay, we've got lots of trained and capable people. One of them was named Zuckerberg, but he went over to California to start Facebook. He's not here in Hudson Valley where he grew up. So I don't think that we have some of the greatest institutions training health scientists as well as computer scientists. The new partnership in New York between Technion and my alma mater, Cornell, and I'm glad it's the Cornell Boathouse that survived. There's going to be lots of highly trained people. So I don't think that's the missing link on the high-end stuff. On some of the other stuff, we're certainly training. We've got an action on the advanced manufacturing, trying to train people to do things that's advanced manufacturing, not the high-tech biotech. The issue on the high-tech biotech is still putting it all together and making sure whatever the good ideas are, the entrepreneurs keep their ideas right here where they grew up, right here, close to where they went to school, etc.
And I agree, and I want to point out, I think that certainly this governor, and I know this council, is interested in making sure that, everybody has an opportunity. So wherever the investment is made with state dollars, that's what we're looking for long term. It's the trickle down that I mentioned, because not everybody's going to go to Cornell or Marist. And so how do we make sure that we're creating industries that support people at all skill set levels so that, of course, regions can prosper? And I guess that's the crux of, my question. On the regulatory side, so what I'm hearing is, because it's the old adage, time is money. So it's more of a consistent, predictable process question as opposed to a regulatory barrier, but more of a predictable process point.
Right.
Understood.
100%. But the training side of things, let me just address that, and the trickle-down side. When I joined this council, I went to my usual source, Wikipedia, to find out what is economic development and how do you grow an economy. And I realized that there's only two ways that an economy grows. One is that people spend more money, so they take money out of their pockets.